All of these big dick deviants is all catching hell in 2024. It's up for all of them. It don't matter if you did it.
Tupac was pronounced dead in 1996, but millions still believe the real story got buried. And now, Katt Williams. The same comedian people keep calling too accurate. Every time Hollywood drama explodes, just sent the internet into meltdown mode after allegedly mentioning powerful industry names tied to the chaos surrounding Pac's final days. Social media detectives are tearing through old federal files, resurfaced interviews, and shocking insider claims that suddenly don't look so random anymore. Every new detail makes the situation look even messier, because according to online theories, some major figures allegedly came out benefiting after Tupac disappeared. What really got people looking at Tupac's case differently again wasn't only those old interviews popping back up online. It was Katt Williams jumping into the conversation and allegedly suggesting Pac's situation may have been way deeper than random street issues. According to people online, Katt seemed to point toward powerful industry figures, the kind of names that allegedly had the most to gain after Tupac was gone. The second that idea started spreading, the same question exploded all over social media again. Who really benefited from Pac disappearing? Because honestly, Tupac was never just another rapper. Pac was outspoken, fearless, emotional, unpredictable at times, and almost impossible to control. He openly called people out, switched alliances publicly, exposed tension in interviews, and never stayed quiet just to protect industry relationships. Back then, the music business was already turning into a massive money machine. Labels, executives, artists, street politics, and media stories were all getting mixed together behind the scenes. And Pac started looking dangerous to that system because he refused to stay silent or follow the script.
Do you think that hip-hop culture was on trial as much as Sean Combs was?
Look, if I didn't say anything, you would interpret it as hip-hop is fine with his behaviors. There's no one else being vocal. So you would look at it and just say, because that mind your business, or let me not say nothing about nothing, or those things, it would allow the entire culture to register as if they're for that behavior.
The first major name Katt allegedly connected to all this was Sean Diddy Combs. Not because there's confirmed courtroom evidence tying him directly to Tupac's death, but because the same rumors and conversations keep resurfacing every time old interviews, FBI discussions, and Keefe D allegations start trending again. According to former LAPD detective Greg Kading, when investigators seriously revisited the case years later, certain names allegedly continued coming up repeatedly behind closed doors. One of the biggest names that keeps coming up is Diddy.
There's also, you go into the book, that apparently there was supposed to be $1 million that Zip was supposed to bring back, but he ended up keeping the money and buying a nightclub with it.
That's what the FBI said.
The FBI said that.
Yeah.
So Keefe D claims that there is this ongoing conversation. It happens on 3 different occasions. But most specifically when he and Puffy are at this place called Greenblatt's Deli on Sunset. And they're there, things have spiraled out of control. Puffy's really concerned about, the welfare of his safety. And he tells Keefe D, man, I just need you to take care of this situation with Suge and Tupac. It's out of control. And he says, I just need you to take care of him. And Keefe D's like, that's no problem. That's what we do. And so an agreement was made, according to Keefe D, for an amount of money. And they kind of just let it go at that point in time. But of course, Keefe D knows in the back of his mind, this is what Puffy wants done. And they all end up out in Las Vegas. But of course, when we interview Keefe D, he's like, yeah, that's what the agreement amount was, $1 million.
So according to Keefe, he's claiming that Puffy offered him $1 million to Suge or Tupac?
Both
or
of them.
both.
Yeah, both their names came up. And according to Keefe D, he says, Tupac's put himself on the list by all the shit talking that he was doing. But it was really about Suge, because it was Suge's muscle that Puffy was afraid of.
Before going any deeper, let's make this clear, nothing has been officially confirmed. But the reason this story refuses to disappear is because too many people from that era keep repeating similar claims and rumors. Even 50 Cent recently added more attention to the situation by implying that the federal spotlight surrounding Diddy may not have started with the current controversies people debate online every day. According to 50, some believe the trail of questions stretches all the way back to Tupac's case. The second those comments started spreading, the internet went wild again. People instantly began digging back into old interviews and statements from Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, the man later charged in connection with Tupac's case. According to Keefe D's own public claims, Diddy allegedly offered money connected to Tupac and Suge Knight years ago. Again, those were allegations from Keefe D's statements, not proven courtroom facts. But once those old claims resurfaced online, people immediately started questioning who was close to the situation back then, who stayed quiet during the chaos, and who later climbed to the top while everything around Pac fell apart. That's when Jay-Z's name started getting pulled right into the conversation. Katt Williams has been especially loud on this angle, and he keeps pointing straight at timing, because honestly, the timeline is what keeps making people look at everything twice. When Tupac was alive, Jay-Z was respected, but he was not at the top of hip-hop yet. Pac and Biggie were the main faces of the culture, no question. They were shaping the energy, controlling the headlines, influencing the streets, and setting the tone for the whole industry. Then suddenly, both of them are gone within a short span of time, and after that, Jay-Z starts rising into a completely different level of power and influence. Coincidence? Some say yes, but online conversations keep circling back to the same uncomfortable question. Who actually benefited the most once Tupac was no longer in the picture? And it goes even further. Years ago, Jay-Z himself admitted he had a diss track aimed directly at Tupac. According to him, he only performed it once at the Apollo and then shelved it after Pac passed away. That detail alone got people talking, because it confirmed there was real tension behind the scenes, not just normal industry rivalry or friendly competition. Trust the online community not to stay quiet for long, because the comment sections lit up fast. One user came in heated, saying Tupac and Biggie passing are the only reason Jay even had a career. Another added, Jay-Z was scared of Tupac. Nobody said anything while Pac was alive, and that's real. The discussion kept escalating, and yet another user shut down the whole diss track argument bluntly. Don't count if it came out after his death. When Pac was alive, all you heard was silence. Then fans started digging back into old clips again, pulling up moments where Tupac openly mocked New York rappers, including people tied to the bad boy circle, right as the East Coast and West Coast tension was hitting dangerous levels. The media kept amplifying that rivalry, pushing it harder every day, and according to Pac in older interviews, he believed the whole narrative was being fueled on purpose behind the scenes. That added even more heat to the conversation online. But the story doesn't stop there, because not everyone connected to Pac is being looked at in the same way. The third name Katt Williams brings into this conversation is Snoop Dogg. Now, before anybody flips the narrative, Snoop has publicly shown love to Tupac multiple times over the years. But older interviews also brought up moments where Snoop seemed uneasy with how intense things were getting behind the scenes. He admitted Tupac had revenge on his mind after the Quad Studios situation, and he also said he never fully believed Biggie was involved in Pac getting set up. That kind of tension mattered, because people close to that era say Tupac started getting more isolated mentally as everything piled up around him. He was angry, emotional, paranoid, and surrounded by different voices all pulling him in different directions at once. Some voices were pushing peace, trying to cool things down before it got worse. Others allegedly pushed for conflict because conflict was profitable and kept attention on records and headlines. Think about that for a second, Jamal Al-Hussein. One time he was yelling on the phone so hard the veins in his neck were popping. That image alone shows how high the pressure was getting around him, with emotions running heavy and every conversation feeling like it carried real weight and consequences behind it. Snoop's name being brought up instantly got the online community fired up again. One user came in strong, saying, Snoop knew Pac was gonna go. Snoop tight with the Diddy did it way back. Another user took a more suspicious angle, writing, Snoop never looks into nobody's eyes when he tells this. Ever wonder why? That kind of talk kept spreading fast across forums and comment sections, adding even more fuel to an already explosive conversation. The East Coast versus West Coast conflict ended up becoming one of the biggest marketing engines hip-hop had ever seen. Magazine covers were selling the drama, interviews were feeding the tension, diss tracks were dropping non-stop, and headlines kept everything on fire. Almost everybody in the industry was benefiting in some way from the chaos, whether directly or indirectly. Meanwhile, Tupac was actually living inside that chaos in real time, not just watching it from a distance. And this is exactly where Katt Williams' comments hit differently for a lot of people, because his whole argument has always been that Hollywood protects powerful figures while quietly sacrificing the loud ones who refuse to follow the rules. According to Katt, the industry rewards silence and punishes disruption, and if there was ever someone who disrupted everything around him, it was Tupac. Pac was outspoken, confrontational, and constantly challenging people around him. And according to internet theories, that kind of energy made him extremely difficult to control. He moved with emotion, and in that world, emotion gets interpreted as unpredictability, which only deepened the tension surrounding him. Now here's the part that really got people online talking nonstop. Remember Uncle Ron, the former celebrity bodyguard who suddenly began posting videos online before later passing away under unclear circumstances? According to Uncle Ron, there were powerful industry figures tied to old hip-hop secrets that people were allegedly too afraid to speak about openly. He allegedly hinted that Tupac's situation was much bigger than random street retaliation, suggesting that certain music industry elites had far more influence behind the scenes than the public ever realized. Then, shortly after posting some of those claims online, Uncle Ron was reported to have passed away from pneumonia. Yes, pneumonia! That timing alone is what set off even more speculation across social platforms. Immediately after, people started connecting his passing to other figures in entertainment whose deaths or sudden losses had sparked years of online debate and theories. Jaguar Wright even responded publicly with sarcasm, implying that too many people in the industry seem to end up with pneumonia right when sensitive topics start getting attention online. Now, none of this proves anything on its own, but online spaces often run on patterns, and once people believe there is a pattern, every new detail becomes amplified. That's why old names keep resurfacing together in the same discussions. Diddy, Jay-Z, Snoop, Suge Knight, executives, bodyguards, former insiders, detectives, and whistleblowers all getting pulled into the same ongoing web of speculation. At this point, it stops feeling like random online gossip and starts sounding like layers of a story people believe was never fully explained. And honestly, one detail keeps sticking in people's minds more than anything else. Tupac knew he was surrounded by danger. In old footage and interviews, Pac often spoke like someone who was already expecting betrayal. He talked about enemies closing in, fake loyalty, set-up energy, and feeling targeted from multiple directions at once. Even Snoop later admitted that Pac had reached a mindset filled with retaliation, stress, and pressure building up on all sides. But that's where the conversation gets even more intense online. What if Pac wasn't just reacting emotionally in the moment? What if he genuinely believed that powerful people in the industry wanted him gone? That question alone is what keeps this entire story alive nearly 30 years later, because the official version has never fully satisfied a large number of people. Too many gaps, too many shifting accounts, and too many individuals who allegedly benefited in the aftermath. Now, with renewed federal attention around multiple industry figures bringing public interest back into old entertainment history, people are revisiting the 1990s with completely different eyes. Younger fans who weren't even alive when Tupac died are now studying timelines, watching old interviews, tracking who rose to power after his passing, and analyzing who stayed silent during key moments. And the same question keeps coming back again and again. Was Tupac's death strictly the result of street conflict? Or was there something much larger and more structured operating behind the scenes the whole time? And if Katt Williams is even halfway right about Hollywood protecting powerful names, then it opens up a much bigger and more uncomfortable idea that the full story was never meant to surface in the first place. Because when people start looking at the pattern, they begin asking why so many individuals who allegedly get close to sensitive conversations end up spiraling out, disappearing from the public eye, retracting statements, or suddenly going completely silent without clear explanations. Then there's the question that keeps coming back online over and over again. Why do old interviews once dismissed or ignored suddenly resurface years later, sounding more convincing than they did at the time they were first recorded? And why does Tupac's name still create tension and discomfort in certain conversations nearly 3 decades later? That's what pushes this beyond just another chapter in hip-hop history. It turns it into a wider discussion about power, influence, fear, and control within an entire industry system. Especially what happens when someone refuses to be managed, softened, or steered in a direction they don't agree with, and instead continues speaking out no matter the pressure building around them. And when you line all of this up, the conversation online starts shifting into something even heavier. People begin questioning not just individual names, but the entire structure surrounding the era Tupac came from. Because at some point, it stops being about one artist or one conflict and starts becoming about how the whole system operated when money, fame, and fear were all colliding at the same time. Some fans point back to how fast narratives were built and spread during that time, how quickly rivalries turned into full-blown wars in the media, and how certain careers seemed to rise right as others collapsed or disappeared from the spotlight. That pattern alone keeps people digging deeper, even when there are no clear answers waiting at the end of it. And what really keeps the discussion alive is how many conflicting voices still exist today, all telling different versions of the same history. Former insiders, artists, bodyguards, journalists, and commentators all offering pieces that sometimes match, sometimes clash, and sometimes raise even more questions than before. That's why Tupac's story never really stays in the past. It keeps getting reinterpreted, reanalyzed, and re-examined every time new information, old footage, or resurfaced interviews hit the internet again, pulling a whole new generation back into the same unanswered questions. And as this conversation keeps evolving online, another layer starts getting added to the mix. People begin questioning how much of what they see in entertainment history is shaped by storytelling after the fact, where events get cleaned up, simplified, or reshaped depending on who is speaking and when they decide to speak. That's what keeps this whole Tupac discussion so active, because there's never been one single version that everyone agrees on. Some fans focus on the documented facts, timelines, and official reports, while others dig into interviews, rumors, and resurfaced footage that seem to suggest there were deeper tensions behind the scenes. The gap between those two perspectives is exactly where most of the debate lives, and it keeps expanding every time something old resurfaces online. Then there's the emotional side of it, where people aren't just analyzing events, they're reacting to the impact Tupac had on culture, music, and identity. That emotional weight is part of why his name still trends in discussions about power and influence, even today. And as more archival content gets reposted and reanalyzed, the same cycle continues. New audiences discovering old stories, forming new interpretations, and asking the same lingering questions that never seem to fully settle no matter how much time passes. And as the conversation keeps stretching further online, people start zooming out even more, looking at the entire industry like a system rather than just a timeline of events. That shift changes everything, because now it's not just about Tupac, it's about how power, image, and money interact inside entertainment at large. Some users point out how quickly narratives can form around artists, how alliances get framed in the media, and how public perception can shift almost overnight depending on what stories are pushed the hardest. Others focus on how silence also plays a role, because when key voices don't speak for years, it leaves room for speculation to grow in every direction. Then there's the way the internet itself reshapes history, pulling old clips, interviews, and statements out of context and reintroducing them to new audiences who interpret everything through a modern lens. That alone keeps old controversies alive far longer than they originally lasted in real time. And through all of it, Tupac's name stays at the center of these discussions, not just because of what happened, but because of what still feels unresolved to many people online. The questions don't fully fade, they just get recycled, reworded, and re-argued by each new wave of listeners trying to make sense of a story that never had a universally accepted ending. And as this whole conversation reaches its final stretch, the energy around Tupac's legacy still doesn't slow down online. If anything, it keeps getting more layered, because every generation that discovers his story brings new interpretations, new questions, and new debates about what really happened and why so much still feels unclear to this day. People keep going back to the same core ideas: the pressure he was under, the industry he was moving through, and the way different voices around him seem to push different directions at once. Some focus on the documented history, others focus on patterns they believe connect over time, and that clash is exactly what keeps this topic alive across social platforms. Even now, decades later, his name still triggers strong reactions because it represents more than just music history. It represents a moment where fame, conflict, and power all collided in a way that still hasn't been fully unpacked in the public eye. That's why discussions like this never really end. They just evolve with time and new audiences. And as more clips, interviews, and old statements continue to resurface, the debate only grows wider, not smaller. Whether people believe the theories or stick strictly to official accounts, one thing is clear: Tupac's story still holds attention in a way very few artists ever have. If you made it this far, drop your thoughts in the comments, like this video, subscribe for more deep dives, and share it so others can join the conversation too.